Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a deep dive into the world of college admissions.
Hi, I'm Susan, and I'm a college counselor and have read applications for a small liberal arts college and 2 research universities. My twins are recent college graduates.
Hi, this is Christina Lopez. I'm an enrollment strategy leader and founder of the Dean's Desk. I spent 20 years in admissions and financial aid, most recently as Dean of Enrollment Management at Barnard College, with previous roles at New York University. Today, I help families evaluate the true financial fit of every college on their students' list before they apply.
I'm Mark Stucker, and I'm the founder and producer. Our mission is to make college knowledge available to all. We care deeply about your kid. We believe college is a match to be made and not a prize to be won. We believe in being genuine and transparent. We are committed to covering a variety of topics, including the tough subjects. Thanks to your generosity, we're committed to providing a minimum of 10 hours of fresh, commercial-free content every month, with episodes every Monday and Thursday. We have a variety of co-hosts because we believe and value diverse perspectives. You're our listening family, and we get great joy every time we meet with you, as we do our best to give you tools so your students can soar and reach their limitless potential. Good afternoon, friends. On today's episode, you are going to have 2 different questions from listeners. One is going to be answered with Susan, and that's actually a follow-up to a question that came in when Susan and I did a discussion from another question from a listener on a student that did gymnastics a lot of hours in high school, is not going to do it in college. And the mom wanted to know how it was going to impact college options. And the listener had some concerns. Were we fully transparent in how we answered that? And so Susan and I take that question up. Then Christina also is going to answer a question. And this comes in from a dad from Michigan. And he wants to know, can admission officers tell when a parent's fingerprints are all over their kids' extracurriculars? But in between those 2 questions from a listener, I'm going to read my 3rd of 11 entries from the Chronicle on the article, How Bad is Higher Ed's Budget Crunch? And then we have a brand new interview, and it is an outstanding one. Lisa did it with Dr. Tricia Siefert, who's a professor at Montana State University. And she's come up with a really cool, both a video game and a board game to help kids transition to college. That's a 2-parter. You'll hear part 1 and 2. But before we dive into the question from a listener with Susan, I want to tell you, so many people have said to me, I love it when you talk about your gardening and you give gardening tips. So I got a couple for you here. These are new for me this year. I tried a couple new things in the garden and they are slamming. One is called Ridiculous Coleus. Not ridiculous, it's R-E-D, red, because it's bright red. And this thing pops. We have like 8 or 10 in the front and 4 in the back. And the other day, somebody stopped by to talk to us about them. I mean, they're amazing. Now, they thrive in full sun. And so first frost, they're dead. But check out Ridiculous Coleus, Coleus, if you want some color to pop and stay constant all year. And then the other thing is Sunshine Ligustrum. This is like the bright gold, and it's evergreen and keeps its color all year. And if you juxtapose it by a Japanese maple, it really pops. All right, enough of the gardening. So last week, or I guess it was probably Thursday, Christina and I talked about the changes that are going on in the Parent Plus loan. And, I mentioned that I don't like the Parent Plus loan for a lot of reasons. And one of them is because literally somebody can make $60,000 and borrow $60,000 in the past. And that's because they only check for adverse credit history. They don't check like debt income ratios, like even when you're getting a car or any other loan, they do to make sure you can afford it. But I realized I never really gave much of a definition of what is adverse credit history. So I thought I should maybe just say a little more about adverse credit history. So your credit is considered adverse if you have one or more account with a total combined outstanding balance greater than $2,085. Now, don't ask me why it's $2,085, not $2,000. I have no idea. So anyway, you can have an outstanding balance of $2,085 for whatever reason in any of the following categories. 90 days or more delinquent on the repayment of a debt, like a revolving credit card. Placed in collection within 2 years. Charge-off written off by a creditor within the last 2 years. And then there's also major financial events if you've had these in the last 5 years. What am I talking about? Default on a loan, discharge of debts in bankruptcy, foreclosures, repossession of a vehicle or just repossession of property, local, state, or federal lien on you, a wage garnishment, or a write-off of federal student debt. So those are the things that are considered adverse credit history. And the problem is some people may not have any of those things, but it doesn't mean they can, I said $60,000 for $60,000 income. You literally could borrow $90,000 before for an income of $50,000 or $60,000 because there weren't limits on the Parent Plus loan, right? So that's why one of the many, many reasons why I don't like it. We talked about some of the others. Go back and hear that conversation if you missed it. I just sort of thought, we didn't really talk about what adverse credit history is, so I thought I should include that. All right, let's get on to something more positive. So you guys know, if you listen regularly, philanthropy really inspires me. I hope someday to be able to do something significant and not just do, little gifts here and there. And I'll tell you, some people have absolutely been stepping up to the plate in a massive and major way. Do you know that there have been 4 gifts of over $100 million in the last month to colleges? 4 gifts. This is incredible. Drexel University got $112.6 million to expand their engineering. And this is from Nick Howley and his family. He's an alum. Over $36 million is going to go to a brand new classroom, lab, collaborative space right on Market Street in Philly. And then the rest is going to go for a number of things, including financial aid, but very focused on their co-op program and on engineering. $112.6 million. Shout out to Drexel. Northeastern gets a lot of attention, but Drexel's basically Northeastern and Philadelphia, and it flies under the radar. They're a fantastic co-op. So shout out to Drexel. Now, the University of Tennessee, $130 million to bolster the business school. Wow. We're talking about UTK in Knoxville. And this is also from alum. D and Jimmy Haslam wants the donation. $100 million goes right to the Haslam College of Business to recruit faculty, strengthen student support, and provide graduate scholarships to support the school's undergraduate honors program. The remaining $30 million goes toward a campus-wide effort to recruit faculty. And the school is being named after Jimmy's father. By the way, in 2014, a $50 million donation came from the same family to UTK. Now, Santa Clara University got a $175 million donation to open a medical school. The largest gift in school history will open a brand new medical school in the San Francisco Bay Area. This comes from a venture capitalist, Mark Stevens, and his wife, Mary, Santa Clara alum. So very, very exciting to see. They're going to open a brand new 82,000 square foot facility 5 miles from the university campus. And last but not least, Washington University in St. Louis, $200 million gift to establish a public health school. This comes from the Bursky Family Foundation to support public health, which opened last year. The private nonprofit will use the gift, its largest ever, to hire faculty, provide scholarships, and support research. So shout out to all these individuals and their philanthropy. Those gifts were given May 13th, May 15th, June 4th, and June 11th. Hot off the press. All right, friends, let's transition to question from a listener with Susan from a well-intentioned mom, just trying to get a little more clarity on something Susan and I said a couple months ago.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Susan, good to see you again.
Hi, Mark. Good to be here.
Well, first of all, thank you for your grace. I was so upset that we recorded for an hour and 47 minutes. And, there's two buttons you have to hit. We were doing it in Zoom. You got to hit record, then you have to hit record to cloud. And I never did that. But we won't have that problem again because we've upgraded to Riverside. It's a better system. But
Amazing.
thanks for being so gracious. If it would have just been me, I would have been very angry. But when you feel like you wasted somebody else's time, like I can be very hard on myself on something like that.
Well,
So,
having been involved in music and theater all my life, dress rehearsals are very important.
No wonder you're so gracious.
Well, dress rehearsals are what it's all about. It helps you get your act together. But I enjoy talking with you and our listening family. No matter what, Mark. So
thank you.
There you
go. So,
go.
friends, the reason why I said that is the response that we're about to play is one that we recorded before. So I'm going to play the question.
Hi, Mark and team. First of all, thank you so much for all of the work that you do and the information that you provide for parents and students as they're navigating the very stressful college application process. I often look to you and your team as truth tellers when admissions officers may not be willing to be as forthcoming with the reality of what the current admissions landscape looks like. That being said, in your most recent episode, I did feel like your team missed an opportunity to do some truth telling. The episode was the episode about a student having only one activity on their resume. As the story was told, the activity on the resume was a moderate level competitive sport with, admittedly, lots of time spent by this student, but not played at the highest level of competition. Where I think the opportunity for nuance was lost is that the parent disclosed that the student's list included both less selective institutions all the way up to more highly selective institutions. I think your advice was spot on for less selective and moderately selective institutions, but you did not address what that one activity might look like for a more highly, most likely not be enough for a student to break through at a more highly selective institution. And I kept waiting for you and your team to address that piece of it. Again, your truth telling is one of my favorite parts of the podcast, and this felt like a missed opportunity to address that portion of the student's application process and how a student who may have put lots of great work into one activity, but it being only one activity at a moderate level, unfortunately, in this particular admissions landscape, may not be enough to help them break through. Thank you so much. Appreciate you hearing my perspective. I look forward to the podcast drops every Monday and Thursday. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Let me start off first. I always have you start off first. You want me to start off first on this one? Okay. Yeah. So, first of all, thank you for your kind words about our podcast. And it's very obvious, we can always tell if someone has constructive criticism, if they're coming from a place of love and support versus, agitation and aggression and stuff. And so it's very obvious that you're really well intentioned, and I appreciate the tone of the remarks.
Absolutely.
And specifically thanking us for being truth telling. So let me tell you where I was coming from, and then Susan can chime in with her thoughts. From our standpoint, we weren't being dodgy. So we had talked about a mom had called in, and their kid had did gymnastics and for lots and lots of hours, but they weren't going to do it in college. So there's several things that I'll say. First of all, when someone says they have some more selective schools, we don't know exactly what that means. Like, people define that very differently. And so that's one point I'd like to make, right? So that's not necessarily clear to me what level they're talking about. So that's one thing. The second thing is, when someone tells me their student only has one activity, I have never found that to be true, because when you start probing and you communicate and you explain to a family what Common App actually wants, and you may have heard me say this before, I don't like the term activity. I wish they would call it time commitments or something like that, because it's a bit more of a reflection of what they want. Because
they are changing the title this year.
Yes.
They heard you.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. Actually, you reminded me of that. So, because when you really talk to a family, they never only have one. They just don't. Once you explain to them that even experiences that are meaningful to you can count as one. And a lot of people don't think of even something like work, which is incredibly important to colleges. And people don't think of even putting things like work down or different service opportunities or certainly household responsibility. I mean, there's a lot of things people don't think of. So when someone says they only have one, that's just not my experience that they really only have one. They're saying they have one main thing that took a lot of their time, and they're not going to do that in college. The other thing that I would say is, and I got to try to communicate this as accurately as I can. There's a lot of nuance here. Maybe Susan could join in and help me. There's no doubt that colleges want impact. We all know that. And selective schools want their bars even higher for what constitutes like being competitive in a highly selective pool. But sometimes families have a tendency, from my experience, to think that extracurriculars almost count more than they do. Like, I don't want to make them sound like they're not important, because they are. What you do outside of class matters, and it matters a lot. But there's more than one way, though, to have impact. Sometimes a person can have incredible personal impact through their personal qualities that might not necessarily be reflected in these robust extracurriculars that most families think you need to have in order for a selective school. So just knowing that the person's looking at a selective school and they spent most of their time on one activity, that's not enough information in my mind to disqualify them from thinking that they couldn't be competitive in selective schools. They could have such incredible kindness and resilience and grit and compassion and work so well at bringing people together and be a joiner and a puller that a school looks at them and think, oh my goodness, this person could have tremendous impact, even that they might not have as robust an extracurricular list as another student. So, and I'm not saying that this is how you think, but I'm saying a lot of people feel when you talk to them, they think that if you don't have an incredibly robust list of national or international or statewide extracurriculars, that eliminates you from a highly selective applicant pool. And that just isn't the case. I would put that in one of the myths about college admissions.
Yes.
So I wouldn't necessarily hear a mom describe their student as being, most of their time being focused on one activity, and they're not going to do that activity in college. That in of itself wouldn't necessarily eliminate them from selective pools. So it wasn't so much that we were being evasive. It's just that wouldn't have triggered in my mind, well, that person wouldn't be competitive. Now, are most highly resourced students that get into the most selective schools, do they have really strong extracurriculars? Yeah. I mean, Vince once said they look like they're 45, and I would agree with that. Like, when I look at the kids that get in the most selective schools, majority of them have extracurriculars that look pretty impressive. But admissions is so specific, it's so nuanced and so individualized, that there could be so many different things that a school could want, and this student could be demonstrating, even through their personal qualities that they demonstrated in that one activity, through how that was communicated. It could really resonate. And then the other thing I'll say, and then I'll let Susan chime in with her thoughts. So one thing that I will always prize and I feel so grateful for is, I feel like since I've been doing this work, and I've always had pretty big caseloads. Like when I was at KIPP, I had 70 on my caseloads for 14 years. That's about 1,000 kids there. And with our company, something like 700 or 800 we've worked with, and then maybe a couple hundred, maybe working with Susan over the years, not in a lead role, but assisting her. So it's around 2,000 kids. And I feel it's equally distributed for me with families that made under 100,000, families that made 100 to maybe 500 in today's income if you were to readjust for inflation, somewhere in that 1 to 4, 1 to 5, and then families making over that. For me, it's been about 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. The difference in extracurriculars for someone that's under-resourced and someone who's highly resourced is ridiculous. And it makes sense because family loves their kid. They have resources. They're going to use those resources to invest in their kid from birth, whether it's music lessons or traveling all around the country because they're interested in volleyball or traveling all over the world. And highly resourced families can just really set their kid up really, really nicely. I don't know what the resource level is of this student or this family. A lot of schools do read in context through the prism of the opportunities that you've had. So I just want to make the case that we didn't have enough information from my standpoint to say your kid might not be competitive in a highly selective pool. And we also don't know how that mom defines highly selective. Like perhaps in your mind, it's T10 or T20, and maybe it's not in her mind. So those are some of my thoughts, Susan. Chime in with your thoughts. You bring so much experience to this conversation.
Well, it's a very interesting scenario, and you're right, Mark, that we don't know enough to be all that definitive about it. But what we do know is that this is a teenager who has been very focused. We have teenagers. Many of them are generalists, and some of them are focused, and they focus on different things over the course of their childhood, depending on their interests and their talents, and also the ability of the family to support the student pursuing those interests. But we have artists and dancers and team sport athletes and individual athletes and horse people and kids who early in their life found something that they absolutely love to do, and they began to focus on whatever it is. Science fair kids. Hillary uses a term, compositional diversity. And I've started using that term because I think it helps families understand that colleges are interested in a lot of different kinds of students as they build their first year class. They have goals for their college community that reflect their mission and values, and often their history and their strategic plan as well. So there may be some colleges where in their strategic plan it says, a winning football team or whatever. I remember, at Villanova, they used to talk about the strategic plan for the marquee sports, which meant the revenue producing sports. So who knows what's driving a college? But, what families can do is they can read the mission and values and the strategic plan. And they're not going to see any college saying, we want a first year class and later alumni, all of whom were hyper-specialized, one-dimensional people. And I'm not a believer that when a student devotes themselves to one thing that they are narrow, because talent and success depends as much on investment, commitment, the joy that you find in doing something. And it sounds like this gymnast lost the joy, or maybe hit the ceiling in terms of development in the sport, or was beginning to discover other things that they wanted to spend some time on, and that they saw too many closed doors due to specialization. Some kids find enormous joy in that. They love what they do. They have found their calling. But, knowing teenagers and any of us who studied psychology, we know it's premature for middle schoolers and high schoolers to close down opportunities. So it's very challenging if you've got if you're parenting a highly talented kid. I've run into this with ballet dancers, where you've got to make sure that their mental health is flourishing, that they're doing other things, because you know what? An injury, being eliminated from an elite level, things happen to kids where a door is shut in big fat ways. So, the best thing that parents can do is help students develop. What do colleges care about? Sure, if the student is going to contribute to something on their campus in a big way, elevate the fencing team, take the ballet program to another level, or who knows, then sure. But even colleges, with few exceptions, keep an eye on the character and personal qualities that are driving those decisions, right? And mental health is such a big choice, or such a big emphasis. So a student who makes decisions and begins to step away is looked at with particular interest, and that's why it's very important for this student to really spend time telling their story.
And Susan, my understanding, it wasn't so much that they quit. It's more like maybe they weren't good enough to play at the varsity level. But this particular question was more focused on, we should have communicated that this person wouldn't be competitive at highly selective schools because they don't have the extracurriculars if it's not something they're going to do at the college level. And this is where we're both pushing back and saying, we can think of plenty of instances where that may not be true, and we wouldn't have enough information to say that. I certainly understand the caller's perspective. Like, I've said this, I mentioned this a few times on this podcast. I look back at 59 kids who got in 11 of the most selective schools that we worked with since 2020. And did the overwhelming majority of those kids have extracurriculars that were quite formidable? Absolutely. So it's certainly not the norm, but there can be plenty of things that a school might be looking for. It could be lots of things. Their location could be appealing. Their academic areas of interest might be an undersubscribed major. There might be just certain things about the kid that just make the kid interesting and unique in college, and they're rare in that pool. You can be rare in a pool without it only being about your extracurriculars. There's other ways for that to happen. And look at all of the custom prompts. Look at what most people call SUPs, or supplemental essays.
Mm-hmm.
Look at how many of them are targeted at identifying whether a student has certain personal qualities that the college has clearly identified as, we want more kids that have that. Whether it's, grit and resiliency, or ability to have very difficult conversations with people who come from all kinds of different backgrounds and do it in a context of being a unifier. Like, the schools are telling you what they want and what they value. I gave a shout out to Peter Johnson on today's podcast, actually, that went live today for Christina's first podcast on our podcast. And I encourage anybody, go to YouTube and put in Peter Johnson, Columbia University. Now, what you're going to see is a 17-minute interview with the Columbia Dispatch and Peter Johnson. And a core part of that interview is, what does Columbia look for? And Peter says this at the start, and he says it at the end. He says, you want to know what any school looks for? Look at the essay questions that we ask. We are telling you what we care about, what we value, and what we're looking for. And he starts with that, and at the very end, he comes back and he hits it again at the very end. And how many of those prompts are targeted to personal qualities and characteristics? So I think that we both felt like we didn't hear enough just to know that someone did gymnastics and won't be doing it in college, and that was the main thing they did. That doesn't tell me enough to say that I should have said, well, you shouldn't be looking at highly selectives because your extracurriculars aren't going to be impressive enough. There's too many other things that a college might be looking for that this student may have, and we didn't have the information to know that student didn't have any of those things.
Absolutely. Well, and when I was at liberal arts admissions, we always asked what we called the broken leg question.
Yeah.
For athlete, and it was a Division III school, so we weren't talking about allocation of financial, athletic financial resources. But when we had a student who was extremely specialized and clearly had made decisions to focus on, a sport or a physical sport or an activity, we had to ask ourselves the question, well, who would this student be at our college without that, if something happened? So that wasn't about, oh, well, look, they also did community service. That didn't really matter. What mattered was the type of person they were and the character and personal qualities they would bring to the life in the dorm, the life on campus. And residential colleges think about these things. Sure, they want the kids who are going to be impact contributors to whatever it is they do well. But there are kids who get to college and stop playing that sport or stop dancing or whatever because suddenly they wake up and they say, I'm more than this. It's not making me happy anymore. And look at all this other cool stuff that I can do while I'm in college to figure out what I love and who I want to be. And that's life. That's what we want kids. We want to see that openness to the future, to bringing what you got, what you own in your body and your soul to new stuff, right? Colleges don't want kids to just see themselves as playing the same thing over and over and over again. If they're recruited for something, then they hope those kids will stick with it and make a contribution. But I think you're right, that in this case, I'd love to have known more, but I do appreciate the mom's concern.
Oh, I think I'm really glad the mom spoke up, because I think this is a misperception that's out there. And I think a lot of people feel like your overly impressive extracurriculars are, if you don't have them in and of itself, it's a
Right.
deal breaker at selective schools.
Yeah.
And I would say lack of positive impact is going to be a deal breaker at highly selective schools, because I have too many kids that have the numbers.
Yep.
But they're not only going to define positive impact exclusively through the extracurricular prism.
Oh, I like that. It's a good way of explaining it.
Yeah. Well, let's end with that. Thank you, Susan. And
You're
thanks,
welcome.
caller. Please send in some more questions. And once again, thanks for your kind words. All right, friends, this concludes the question from a listener with Susan. I'm going to transition now, and I'm going to read to you the third of 11. I'm reading these entries on the Chronicle article called How Bad is Higher Ed's Budget Crunch? All right. Now, this comes from Tricia McGuire. It's a shorter one. She's the president of Trinity Washington University. And here's what Patricia says. The name of the article is High President Pay is a Warning. Reading a list of college closures is like scanning the obituary section of a newspaper. It provides relief that my university is not on the list, shock at who's on it, surprise at who's not there. The budget crisis is real. While declining enrollments and federal disinvestment are frequently cited as causes, a bigger issue is that too many institutions spend well beyond their means, maintaining traditional programs and services with diminished market appeal. Whenever I read about closure, I check the institution's most recent tax return to see deficit positions, endowments, large contracts, and top executive salaries. Invariably, the executive salaries are disproportionate. While this is not the sole cause of institutional closures, the failure to control management expenses, coupled with the belief that spending more in salaries must mean more creative or competent leadership, leads to great institutional sorrow when those hopeful bubbles burst. Addressing the size and cost of institutional management must be a priority in reimagining the expense side of the ledger. But colleges must also take a hard look at consulting contracts, especially for enrollment and marketing, and construction debt. It is foolhardy to borrow heavily under the impression that students will flock to expensive, glamorous new residence hall or new athletic venues. On the other side of the ledger, diversifying revenue streams is essential. While anathema in corners of the faculty lounge, developing new programs that focus on workforce needs in the college's region can be income-producing partnerships with both government agencies and private employers. And even small colleges can break free from the hegemony of the baccalaureate degree and the rigid fall-spring semester by offering new credentials that include stackable credits and even associate degrees. Gasp. She put gasp in the article, not me. Operating the business for 12 months by adding summer semesters is essential, and short-term programs have very different pricing structures that are often more attractive to a broader mix of students. All right, that's Article 3 of 11. Next week, we've got one by Jeffrey Salingo, and it's called Don't Delay the Inevitable. Don't delay the inevitable. Jeffrey Salingo, former editor of the Chronicle, special advisor to the president at Arizona State, and author of several best-selling books on higher education. All right, friends, let's transition to your second question from a listener. This comes from a dad from Michigan, and he wants to know if admission officers can tell when a parent's fingerprints are all over their kids' extracurriculars. Okay, Christina, you survived week 1, so I guess it couldn't have been too bad.
I came back.
You're back.
I am back.
Christina and I were talking off air before about some of these questions are juicy in a good way. So we love it. We love it. I'm going to play this question from a dad from Michigan. Let's play the question, and Christina, take this one where you want to go. I agree. This one's juicy. I want to hear what you have to say on this one.
Hi, Mark. Love the show. I've been listening for a couple of years now. I'm a father in Michigan. Got a student who's going into his 3rd year at the University of Michigan. Go Blue. And I've also got a student who's going to be a senior in high school, and he's starting on this college application process for himself. Now, over the years, both of my students have participated in science Olympiads and robotics competitions and the like. And with that experience, we've noticed that some teams, including our own, would be explicitly and obviously hands-off when it came to adult participation in the project or adult coaches actually engaging in the competition. Now, other teams are very clearly parent and adult coach hands-on. What I'm talking about is robots being worked on by engineer coaches and parents, while the students stand in the corner on their phones, and then they just drive their adult-created robot to a first-place finish, or a student who's toting into a science Olympiad some contraption that was clearly built by an adult or a coach of some kind. Everyone can see it. Many of us talk openly about it. It's sort of a running joke, but it's invariably those adult-curated and adult-created projects that do most of the winning at these Olympiads and competitions. So I've noticed the same thing recently when listening to this podcast and others, when parents flat out use the first-person narrative when asking how should I list these activities on the Common App, or how should I list these awards? These folks aren't even pretending to be collecting information for their students to assist them in the process, and they're pretty much telling the world that they're planning on writing their students' Common App for them. So my question is, are parents and college admissions counselors doing this writing on behalf of their students? And if they are, which I suspect some of them are college admissions officers savvy enough to sniff that out? And will it actually matter if a college admissions counselor sees that a parent or another professional was doing the writing for this student? I'm firmly of the mindset that if a student can't even complete an online form on his or her own, then they can't possibly thrive in any college, let alone a selective one. But that's my viewpoint. And am I setting my student up for a less than ideal outcome when during our entire educational career, we've seen firsthand how parent or professional involvement has rewarded those students whose parents and professionals step in to do the creating for the student? Hope to hear some decent feedback or reflections on this, and I appreciate all you do. Thanks.
Okay.
To get that sigh out. Now, you always kept it real when you were in admissions. That's why that's one thing I always loved about you. And now you're a complete free agent. No board member can tap you on the shoulder and say, Christina, what are you saying at an info session? So
I know.
You can just bring the heat and keep it real.
Can we tell? Usually, yes. And I will tell you why. There are lots of pieces to an application. Right? In a holistic review, you've got the application itself, you've got the essays, you've got supplements if the school has them, you've got letters of recommendation, and so on and so forth. You've got test scores, what have you. All of those make up a piece of the puzzle, and they tell their own separate part of the story, right? And there are some pieces that a student
can control, and then there's some that can't. And so when a student isn't really presenting their true authentic self in the application, it really shows up in other parts, right? So this parent that might be, doing the project work for this student, or giving them this boost, it's going to show up in the teacher recommendations, you know, because they can't really help the student in the classroom. Um, even in the supplements, sometimes it's like, yeah, you're getting help, in writing that essay. Sometimes not the supplements, sometimes, they are polished, sometimes not. But usually there's a through line that's not happening. The bigger part of this question is a lot of these parents are doing this because of their fear that their student i- n- is not going to be or stand out in a highly selective pool. I can tell you that the students who we admit and the students who have been admitted into these schools where you see, admit rates of 5%, 4%, et cetera, lower, these are all strong, self-directed students, and that narrative tells that story all the way through the application, right? There's an authentic the student is authentic in the way that they present themselves. You can see how their reflectiveness, you can see that they've pursued things that they care about, right? Like those are things that stand out, right? The parents who are pushing or who are doing, they're usually the ones that are the most disappointed in this process, because at some point along the way, you've made this process about you and about your validation rather than the student doing what needs to be done for themselves. And ultimately, that's not really helpful, because the goal of parenting is that they leave. You want them to be independent, thoughtful adults. And when they get to college, that is the beginning of that process. If you have been undercutting that development throughout high school by doing things for them and constantly boosting them, then that will continue when they're there. And at one point, you want to pull back. So, yes, the answer is we can usually tell. Um, and yeah, some of those students might be admitted to great schools too, right? And there's usually because they're still strong students and schools need them. But it's the larger question is that the type of student that you want to raise, right? Because college is just college. It's another chapter, especially for undergrad. Like now, students need grad school, really, for a lot of these degrees. And the question really is that the kind of adult that you want to raise? So that's all I'll say about that.
So, how do you strike the balance? Because on the one hand, and I'm thinking of what's his name, Senior Dean over there at Rice. He left Florida, go to Rice. He oftentimes says, "We don't judge what we don't see."
Mm-hmm.
Meaning we don't know for sure, so we're not going to judge because we don't know. But then on the other hand, I smell a rat. I've been doing this a long time. I smell a rat. Meaning, I don't think this is all the student. And this applies to other things, right? This applies to all the nonprofits kids are doing, and all the charities that kids are starting, and research getting published, and research. Like you've seen the increase of that out there. There's a lot of consultancies out there that they sell their services on. We'll hook you up and we'll get you a passion project. Blah, blah. And so as I interview people like you over the years, I frequently hear that, I can't believe how many more of these kids are starting charities, starting nonprofits, publishing research. Like, this is ridiculous compared to 10 years ago. And they're suspicious. So how do you kind of strike that balance between not wanting to be unfair to a kid because your gut tells you, I just don't believe this is a lot of this stuff is student generated, but then there's another voice in your mind, but we don't know for sure. So how do you sort of sort through that when it comes to who you admit and who you don't? Is that a fair question?
That is. And honestly, some of that is just, it's speculation, right? And when we're reading applications, you're exactly right. We can't judge what we don't see. I am evaluating what's in front of me, right?
Mhm.
But I'm also evaluating all of it. And, mm, you've got teacher recommendations, you've got counselor recommendations. I can usually tell what's between the lines, between what's being said and what's not being said, right? Counselors are very good at that. And so like I'm looking for the through line. I'm looking for the entire narrative. I'm not just looking at the quantitative pieces, and I think this is partially the problem that, why we've put so much pressure on, like, you have to have this amazing essay now to get in, because yes, there are many students in the applicant pool with exceptional grades and scores, and so yes, that essay tells me a lot, but it's not the polish of it that makes the difference. It's the fact that I can see the student, that I can start to recognize the human that's there, um I can see their story and how they think. I see the lens that they use to view the world. And the ones that are able to convey that are more compelling applicants. You can't manufacture that, really. You can help guide a student to tell a story, but you can't juice something that doesn't have anything in it, right? And
Mhm.
so for me, like, it's not necessarily questioning, well, did they have a whole lot of help with this, or did they, you know, how much affluence or resources or all the things that they had. It's a matter of like, am I really seeing the true narrative, the authenticity in the student? Do I see what they're going to bring to campus? Does it feel genuine throughout the application, even in the parts that they can't control? And that's usually what I'm looking at. Now, are there some students who have all of those pieces, the nonprofit and the charity and all of those things that again, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's not because of those things. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's the narrative that if you have to have these things in order to even be considered, it's not those things. It's who they are and what they've done with it and the why underneath it, right? It's not just listing things that sound cool.
No, and I'm glad you pointed out that those kids get it. Like I don't mean to disparage nonprofits and charity and research, right? Like those things can be absolutely phenomenal.
Mhm.
I guess the question is in this
Why are you
context.
doing it?
Yeah,
Yes, like, if you're
and
doing it
is it
because you
coming
think
from
it's
you? Or
yes,
is it something
exactly.
that really somebody else is doing almost everything and you're just looking like it,
Right,
yeah, you know, masquerading like it's your work and it's somebody else's work, which is really the essence of the question.
correct.
And that doesn't mean a parent can't help a kid. So there's like always like a fine line here, right? There's like at what point
There's
is it
helping and doing.
excessive? Yes, exactly. There's helping and doing. Well said.
Right,
Helping and doing.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Do you I know over the years you would get calls from parents in the process. Were there times when a parent would call and the parent would be so over the top? This is before decisions were out. That there
Mm.
would be almost a little asterisks, like, from parent behavior. I'm gonna ask the tough questions, Christina. Your laugh's telling a story. What do you want to
The
say about
wise
that?
the wise ones wouldn't tell me their student's name because they knew. I'm being a little too extra here.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yes. And, there are some that you're just like, th- this this process is about the student,
Mhm,
right? And there are many families that make it about them and their own value signaling. And it becomes a problem because they don't see the difference between the helping and the doing, right? And it just becomes this constant interference that is now getting in the way of your student actually shining, right? Because now all I'm thinking about is you instead of the student. So yeah, I have always advocated, like, if there's a phone call that needs to be, make the student make the call, let the student send the email, because you calling or you're emailing, 9 times out of 10, it's a different tone, unless it's something that's, financially related and things of
Sure.
that nature. Obviously, you have to do that. But, how many parents, so many parents calling just to check the status of their student's application? That's something
Right.
very easy that the student can do
Yes.
themselves,
Yeah.
right? This constant anxiety of like, well, the counselor said they sent it. Did they send it? Da, 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 like
Sure.
that's the thing that gets in the way. And we try not to count it against the student, and because
But when it's
obviously we're
excessive,
enrolling the
you probably
student,
can't. Yeah.
because we're enrolling the family.
Sure. Sure.
And that's not a parent that's going to automatically go away once the student moves into the residence hall. And I
Yeah, I
think
just
about
remember
my
I had a
colleagues and I'm
flashback.
like,
I just had a
oh dear.
flashback to when I was doing boarding school admission, and there was a kid we wanted, and a parent that was so over the top. And I remember saying, it is a good thing that this parent is 1,500 miles away, because if this parent was closer, uh-uh, you know?
Well,
And I've had to talk to many of my parents over the years that have told me, yeah, I called, and I've had to tell them, that's not your role. Like, that's this, it's, I sometimes feel bad because when I have this conversation, you think about that kind of parent that does that. Oh my goodness, they are so crestfallen when I talk to them then, because now they think, oh my goodness, did I just blow my kid's chances? What have I done?
yeah,
You know?
yeah,
But I
yeah.
have to talk to them and say, that is not your role. Like, the college does not want to hear from you on this,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I mean, and I have seen it on the other side as well.
Hmm.
There were parents who would call their student's on-campus employer and say, "Hey, my student isn't going to make it in today." Like, did you just call out for your student who is on campus here? R- right? Like, um, sending uh job applications or cover letters or what have you to their employer with their parent CC'd on it. Why? Stop
Right.
it.
Right.
Like there's this, we have to, the behavior that you want them to be independent. You want them to grow into adults. That you have to start modeling that now,
Hmm.
because that reliance doesn't go away, even if they're sending them 3,000 miles away.
Yeah.
Um,
No, because
you
I
know,
can think of a parent that was overly involved, great person, but overly involved the whole time, and I was concerned about it. I had to address it a few times. And that parent is hopping on planes now and flying to that school, because I'm working with the sibling, and so yeah, like, the parent has gone a lot. They're flying there, they're staying in a hotel for the week, and they're doing that, and they're getting involved. It's bad.
mhm.
I also interview students, college students. I've been doing more of that recently. And I had a parent that was really upset with me that I didn't ask them for permission to interview their 20-year-old.
Oh.
Like, don't get me wrong, most people are not like this. I've had other people that I've interviewed, and the student didn't even tell their parent. I've literally sent the interview to the parent afterward, and the parent has been cool about it. So I'm not trying to paint all parents to this, but I'm saying this because we have parents that listen, and I want them to know some of the behaviors that don't land well, because I know they do care. I know they care. It's just that their anxiety can cause them sometimes to, and let's face it, it can be hard. It can be hard to draw that right balance. And
Right.
especially with the kid that maybe your concern is not as self-directed as I mean, it's just hard. It's hard striking that balance. I don't want to make it sound like it's easy.
No. But the consequences, you know, of the parents pushing that anxiety onto the kid, I have seen the effects that that pressure has on
Uh-huh.
them. They are overwhelmed, they're stressed, they are overwhelmed because they're trying to live up to someone else's expectations that they're never going to meet. because you're never going to meet anybody else's expectations other than the ones that you set for yourself. And it causes a mental health crisis. And so understanding parenting changes as your child grows. My daughter is 18 months old.
Mm-hmm.
I got to help her walk up the stairs.
Sure,
Like
of course.
she's trying to walk,
Of course.
but there's at a certain point, allowing them to make their own mistakes. And that's hard to watch them do that. But they have to, because that's how they learn. And the constant doing for them undercuts that ability for them to learn from those mistakes. So it's hard. It's a hard balance.
Now I'm going to say something that is probably going to be controversial. I think you're probably going to disagree with me. And it's going to seem like I just contradicted every single thing that I said there.
Okay.
And the listener brought this up. So parents will oftentimes use the term we. And I know that really can grind admission officers' gears. It's not we, And the listener said it. And as soon as you say we, then I don't trust blah, blah, blah. I don't know what school you could go. This is what I'm going to say. I'm not offended when I hear somebody say we, because it still is a family, this still is a family decision. If for no other reason, then your parents are paying for it.
Yes.
So just in and of itself, a parent saying we doesn't trigger to me you're stepping over the line. There's nuance there.
I don't think the issue is the word. I think it's the context behind it, right? There's we as a family, we're moving into the residence hall, that sort of thing. My student is moving into residence hall. It's like, we are applying. Well, okay, right? There's students applying. Yes, there is a portion of this that is very important for you, because that bill will come to you, not to the student. But I think that there are boundary lines that need to be drawn, right? That this is the student's application. That it is their job to complete it and be authentic about it and what have you. As a family, we are thinking about which schools we're applying to, because there is, the old idea of the student picks the school and mom and dad will figure out how to pay. That was cute when total cost of attendance was like $30,000, $40,000, not at $100,000, right? So yes, applying is a we decision, but once your kid is there, there's not really a we, it's they, and that separation needs to happen. So I think there is a context behind the
agree.
we.
The way you explained it, I don't have any problem with that. The only thing I would say is I don't think we has to exclusively only be money. It's not exclusively money. And here's what I oftentimes say to families.
Okay.
Like, if you feel as if your kid is about to go off the cliff by putting themselves in an environment that is so deleterious to them based on what you know, you have a right to speak up and intervene, and that's not bad parenting to do that. So to me, I would say it's not exclusively limited to the money. Now, what I like to say to families I work with is, a parent, you can be a part of the initial list and giving your approval, and some of that is financial, like I'm not going to pay for such and such or whatever. It's not only financial. It's if you don't think that the school rises to the level that, you're supportive of it. Obviously, there's extremes. If you're going over the top, listen, if it's excessive, I'm not comfortable with that. But once the list is picked and agreed upon, then let the kid pick, as long as it's within budget. Don't come in afterward with an opinion. That to me is kind of a bit of a balance. Like you sign off, okay, these all look like good schools. This is fine. Here's our financial parameters. Any of these ones you want to go to, I'm good with it. But don't come in and start saying, I want you to go to this one over that one. That to me crosses the line. What are your thoughts?
Well, this is very important, because a lot of families are not doing that financial assessment when that list is being built.
Correct.
And so if they're not, and then at the end, now they have very strong opinions because,
Correct.
hey, this school didn't give us anything, and so you can't go there. However, if we understood how financial aid was allocated and understood how to think about the financial fit piece of this, then yes, at the end, you know that they're all choices that the student can make on their own, right?
Yeah.
Because you know that all of them are within range. So there's a critical piece that needs to happen in order for that part that you said to be okay,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and not just a lot. I would say the majority of times. I mean, not our listeners because they're a different type of breed, but most of the time this
No.
happens.
Yes.
This happens all the time. I was talking to a family I worked with in California
Mhm.
this year, and they were talking about how their kid had wanted to go to the University of Miami, and all the presentations were early decisions going to increase your chances. And they were shocked when they got a $97,000 bill.
Mhm.
And that's the kind of thing that happens all the time out there if people aren't educating themselves.
Correct.
And then they're like, how do I let her down? She's so happy. We told her she could do this. We had
Yep.
no idea. We how much money do they think we have over there? We just assumed they would know. We don't have $100,000. I mean, this happens all the time if you're not educating yourself.
Correct.
And that's the piece you're talking about,
Yes. Early decision, I think there are two. There's a lot with this, but there's the assumption that early decision is only for the rich, right? That if you can pay full price, then early decision is for you. Early decision is now becoming almost a necessity because, particularly for a lot of schools that are highly selective and are taking, more than half of their class in early decision now, if you can see that admit rate for early decision is significantly higher than regular decision, then yeah, if you really want a shot at that school, early decision is the way to do that. And so, unfortunately, it now pushes families who do want to compare prices and makes them have to make the choice between do I take the best shot of getting my student admitted to the school, or do I take my best shot of getting aid? And that's a really unfair position to be in, but it's the position that we find a lot of families in. And so being able to understand the financial aid piece of this and really being able to assess, am I getting a true good net price, and feeling comfortable with that can make the decision of whether to apply early or not an easier one. But if you're just kind of like, well, we're going to apply early decision because that's their shot and we'll just wing it and see what happens, that's when you get hit with the $97,000 bill. And you're
Yeah.
either going to borrow your way out of it, which you can't now,
Yeah.
unless you do
I
like
want to
private
push
loans,
back a
or
little bit on the necessity
okay,
piece, but probably were saying the same thing. Yeah, the way you were calling necessity, I believe, is necessity if you really want to go to that school. In other words, there's a
correct.
good chance
Yes,
you'll lose that option if you don't.
correct. There are some great schools, like a regular decision, you still have fantastic shot.
Yeah, and a lot of times people don't know how much money they're leaving on the table, especially in an era
Yes.
where we're in, where colleges are throwing money at kids. And
Yes.
like and colleges that are perceived as very good schools are throwing a lot of money at families. Like listen, people are all over the place on money, right? There's people for whom it's just, it's $10 to them. They have so much. It's nothing. And then there's others that's just crazy for you to be paying this kind of money. Like this just makes no sense. You're going to be in debt till you're 50 or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard when we're talking like this in a vacuum across such a range of people's different financial spectrums. But I know what you meant. You meant a necessity. If your bottom line is, I want that school, and if I have to pay more, I'm willing to pay more in that case. But I push back on the word necessity because so many times people feel like if I don't apply ED, I'm not going to have a good school option and a good college option. And I would disagree with that. And I feel I have lots of evidence every year to show that that's not true.
And I agree with that. I don't think that, I think it depends on the schools that are on your list, right?
I agree with that too. Totally.
There are many schools where your regular decision application is great. But then there are some schools, some highly selective schools, where your admit rate in regular decision is 3%,
Yeah.
4%, right? Versus 25% if you applied in early, right?
And there's another factor which I know you'll agree with, which is how strong the applicant is. Right? Like
Correct.
there's a student that is so strong they are going to be fine, you know? And they meet so many of schools' different institutional priorities. They're going to be fine. Now that may not mean that they're not getting their first choice, but they're still going to end up with some options that they're likely to be really pleased with. So the strength of the
Yes.
candidate, you know, the problem is most people don't know how to self-assess that. They think, well, I got a 1530 on the SAT, and they don't realize how much that's a dime a dozen. That is literally nothing at Barnard, because I see all the kids that I've sent to Barnard over the years. It means nothing. I mean, I'm not saying it means I mean, I'm not saying it means nothing. Like
It's one piece of it.
it's one piece, but there's a boatload of kids that are not getting in with 1530s at NYU and Barnard for many, many reasons, because you're more than a test score. But the average person tends to be enamored by high testing more so than they should be if they're applying to highly selectives.
Well, and unfortunately, the landscape has changed a little bit because of the test optional. So all of
Correct.
those
Sure.
testing, ranges have been pushed up
Yes.
because under test optional, only
Sure.
students who had strong scores submitted.
Yeah.
So, now that there are some schools that are going back to, being required, it's not like those averages are going to go back down. They are where they are now. So every school kind of got that boost. So yeah, it's and particularly because of, especially with a lot of schools, it's a self-selecting pool. They've looked to see, are they in range, right? So the
Sure.
majority of students in those pools have the grades and the scores, but those are just
Sure.
letters and numbers.
Yeah.
I'm admitting
Yeah.
people to a
Yes.
community. And so that's where that holistic review piece comes in.
Christina, this was great. I'm having fun with you here. This is good stuff. Thank
Oh
you.
yeah. Yeah, of course.
All right, friends, let's transition to a brand new interview Lisa did with Dr. Tricia Siefert from Montana State University on how to use board games and video games to help kids transition to college. I want to say, friends, we're doing a lot more content on how, not just how to get in college, but how to be successful once you get there. Once this interview airs, I did an interview with a professor at Rollins for the last 25 years and an expert on the first 6 weeks and how critical the first 6 weeks are up. So between this interview and that interview, you're going to get about 6 straight weeks of content on how to successfully transition to college. But without any further ado, let's turn things over to Lisa, Dr. Lisa Ruff and Dr. Tricia Siefert.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, I'm really excited for you to hear this interview that Lisa did with Dr. Tricia Siefert at Montana State University. She has come up with such a creative way of helping students transition to college. And the interview just really inspired me. So it's a two-parter. And let me tell you what you're going to hear today in part one. Lisa gives Dr. Seifert's background, and then Dr. Siefert adds a few more details about her role is at Montana State. Tricia explains why she created a game about going to college to help explore what she calls the hidden curriculum. Tricia explains what the hidden curriculum is. Tricia shares what she believes is the single biggest challenge college students face. You don't want to miss this. Tricia shares why she dislikes the term soft skills. Tricia goes into more depth about how gameplay helps students successfully transition to college. Listen and enjoy.
Hi, this is Lisa, and I am a host on the Your College Bound Kid podcast. And I am very happy to be here today with Dr. Tricia Siefert, who is a nationally recognized scholar, dean, keynote speaker, and also the founder of Success Prints Crash Course, which is a game for higher education that prepares students to navigate college before they're actually at college. She is the Dean of the College of Education, Health, and Human Development at Montana State University. And she helps prepare educators and leaders who influence K through 12 education all across the country. In addition, she's also the co-author of a book that I think we all refer to a lot without knowing it, which is How College Affects Students. And she synthesized the evidence demonstrating the impact of college on cognitive, civic, and career outcomes. And her research has appeared in many leading journals. And I realized after I talked to you, Dr. Seifert, that I'm always quoting like, well, but it's better to be a big fish in a smaller pond, and it's better to, have all these different experiences at college rather than go on prestige. And I didn't realize I was quoting you. So I just want to make sure that I'm going to give that citation the credit it is due. But in addition to doing all that, she's also designed the Success Prints Crash Course, which is either a board game or a video game. Then they were developed by students for students, and they allow students to practice and rehearse decision making, time management, help seeking, and long range planning before they are actually doing it in real life at college. So welcome, Dr. Seifert, to the podcast. We really are happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
So tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to be doing what you're doing.
Sure. Thank you so much. Honestly, I've focused on supporting students' success my entire career. When I was preparing for today's conversation, I thought back over what I've been doing for 25 years, and whether working at a boarding school for teenagers with learning disabilities, to creating a leadership development program within the residence halls where I was a staff member. For 25 years, I've been motivated to help students tap into their interests and potential. And I continue to do that today as Dean of the College of Education, Health, and Human Development at Montana State University. My work there is maybe tacked a little bit in that while I don't work as directly every day with students, I'm working with faculty and staff members to create conditions and experiences for students to reflect, learn, and innovate in teaching and in helping and health professions.
That's great. So what motivated you to make a board game? Did you ever see yourself doing that when you started your career?
Never, never in a million years, honestly. But after publishing with my friends and co-authors How College Affects Students, I really had a chance to reflect on what did I learn from writing that book. And I was continuously astonished by the fact that college success is not a foregone conclusion. In fact, roughly 1 out of 4 students who begin at a 4-year university do not return for their second college year. And to me, this seemed like a huge loss of potential, not only for that individual student, but for their family and their community, and honestly for our whole country in terms of the cost of college, and then that return on that student's investment in the experience. And often it's not because students aren't aware or aren't prepared enough to do college. It's just they're bewildered by the process of trying to navigate the college experience. And that's because on some levels, higher education honestly has what we call the hidden curriculum. And the games, both the board game and the video game, are designed to demystify this hidden curriculum by inviting students, players, to play and practice what it's like going to college before the consequences are real. And so players get a chance of asking for help and using campus resources, whether that's working with professors or teaching assistants or resident assistants. It invites them to think through about getting involved with campus clubs and organizations, or maybe even being part of a professor's research team. And why games? That's such a great question. I'm fortunate to have some super gamer nephews, and I was watching them one holiday and how much they were learning from playing games. They were learning a ton about world history through Sid Meier's civilization game, and we were learning about macroeconomics in this card game that we played as a family. And so I started thinking, what if we were to create a game about going to college? And I tossed that idea out to my nephews, and before I knew it, I had sort of commandeered our entire holiday family vacation because they were drawing and ideating and thinking, and we were brainstorming ideas. And I still have all of those original drawings and ideas from my nephews, and they really informed what we're doing today. And the feedback that we receive from players of the board game and the video game always come back into the next iteration. And so there's always new content coming out and being released, and it's informed by the people who are playing the games.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And you mentioned the hidden curriculum. What is the hidden curriculum?
Yeah, it's sort of like, how do you do college? It's the norms, it's the rules that maybe are unspoken. It's what we value in higher education. And oftentimes, these kinds of things are not clearly written down. Like, getting to know your professors is highly valued because if you're looking to go to graduate school, you're going to need to have a reference letter from one or more of your professors. But if you don't know that early on or going into second or third year, you might be at a disadvantage. And so we're trying to make those kind of hidden pieces more known through gameplay.
That's great. I think a lot of people that I've talked to who work at universities have said that they are seeing some gaps in preparedness. The college students that are hitting campuses today. What have you seen from students as they enter college that are like sort of gaps in their preparedness that we should probably start fixing?
I think time management is probably the number one. When I ask students, what's going on and how are you doing? And they talk about the difficulties of balancing all these different competing demands. On one hand, they want to do academically, but then they're also thinking about how to manage their friendships and their social engagements, and they are still working maybe on campus and or off campus. All of these components feel like they're competing for the same 24 hours in the day. And so thinking consciously about how you manage your time is really the centerpiece and how we built both of the board game and the video game. Time management in balance is the key game mechanics, if you will. And why is time management so important? It's because we see this every semester. You would think that going to class is simply like a no-brainer, but it doesn't appear to be, because by the 12th week, the attendance pattern in a college class is often really decreased. And so thinking through how are you managing your time and keeping the motivation, but also just sort of the interest in continuing to get to that class, working with a team, maybe that's establishing a study group so that you feel more committed to that learning. Because what you put into it is quite honestly a huge reflection of what you're going to get out of that class
Hmm.
experience.
Hmm. Yeah. What about, like you mentioned working with professors. I see that a lot of, and I find this in with my own kids and with many other high school students, they do not want to talk to grown-ups. They will do anything to avoid talking to a grown-up, which seems curious to me because the grown-ups today seem so much nicer than the grown-ups that I had to talk to. But, tell us more about that problem.
Yeah, I think, I will blame COVID in so many ways. We became really addicted to our screens and sending messages and not actually having to sit face to face with someone. And it's one of the things that I think in colleges we're really tasked with addressing as we prepare students for a workplace where they're going to be working in teams. There's such little work that is solely done. You're really working with people. And so having a comfort level to look someone in the eye and to be able to make your point, ask good questions, listen deeply and empathetically to what your team members are saying and offering. Like these are what used to be called the soft skills. And I think that these are essential skills. There's nothing soft about them. In fact, listening to someone with whom you might have some disagreement is actually very difficult. Like that is a hard skill to develop and to learn. And so the degree to which colleges can really promote the development of that is instrumental. And part of our opportunity is to show up and be available for students. And I think there is this old stereotype that the college professor doesn't care about students. And I think that is just a myth. And it's certainly not been in my experience. And I have been on campuses that are as small as 1,200 students to when I was at the University of Toronto with 60,000 students. That just simply wasn't my experience. Professors want to hear from their students. And oftentimes when they're there in their office hours, they're waiting for you to come by. They're waiting for a student to come and ask a question, to follow up on a point. They're so eager to share what they have learned over, decades of study and to really help make what is the muddy point in that last class lecture clearer to the student. But they can't read that student's mind. They don't know if that student is lost or confused. And so it's really incumbent upon the student to ask proactively for greater clarification. And I know I'm fortunate with my nieces and nephews to be able to suggest this. Like I just recently, a couple months ago, had this conversation with my niece. Like, I think you just need to ask the question. If you're not clear, they don't know. That professor will not know that that material is unclear to you unless you ask for greater clarification. And I think that's part of the hidden curriculum is asking for help and knowing that help seeking is normal. It's not a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of incredible strength and personal knowledge that you need some help and that you're going to seek it proactively.
Yeah, that's a huge point. And I think that, I see colleges when I visit, they're trying to approach this in different kinds of ways. But the idea that kids will not seek out these services that are there, whether it's the career center, whether it's, health or mental health services or, academic help. And so one of the things I love about this game is it forces kids to rehearse that. And we all know if you rehearse something in your mind, then it's a little bit easier for you to go do it in real life. Or maybe from some first gen students or students who are not as educated about college, they don't even know that they have all those services to rely on. And so creating that kind of awareness, like, hey, there might be a tutoring center I could go to is such a big part of this game that I think is so beneficial. But yeah, I when I work with kids, trying to make their college lists, this is not something that they look at. Support services or how to make relationships with professors. They're thinking about, and many times, and they're teenagers, but football, like, and social scene. And they're, and when I say, well, maybe you want to go to this liberal arts college, and they're like, Lisa, but it only has 3,000 people. I'm like, I know, isn't that fantastic? It's amazing. Think of how much, closer you can get to all the resources that you have. So I really hope that the young people of America start to pay more attention to this, because I think every school that I've been to has incredible resources. I've never been to a school where they're like, yeah, no, we're not going to help you. Good luck,
Yeah, and I think that's why one of the values of gameplay, especially with families, can really illuminate the multitude of resources that exist on today's college campus. Today's campus is not the same as when I went to university in the mid-90s. There's just so many more opportunities and people and staff members to support students in being successful, But if you don't know the names of those offices, if you don't know where to find, say, the tutoring center or the writing center or the math help center, whatever the title or name of that program is, you just won't seek it out. And it really comes out of my own research that motivated why the campus resources are central to the board game, literally central. They're in the middle of the game board.
Mm-hmm.
And every round, every week of play, you reveal 4 new campus resources. So over the course of the game, players are learning about this multitude of programs and services that they can then ask about when they're going on a college tour. Like, hey, I've heard about this thing called counseling and psychological services through gameplay. Do you have something like that here on your campus? Or I've learned about a food bank
Mm-hmm.
to help students who are experiencing food insecurity. Do you have such a resource like that on your campus? Like, it's so valuable for players to learn this language and for their family members also to learn it, because it may be new. Even if you went to university
Mm-hmm.
yourself, things have changed. And so knowing this multitude of services can cue parents to ask good questions of their students in that first college year.
Yeah, I find that a lot of parents I talk to are frustrated that their children are resistant to going to the career center or going to get tutoring, and that is a point of contention,
Mm-hmm.
with between the parent and students. If they're talking about, at least before the child goes to college, maybe it will alleviate some of that later on, I think
Yeah.
too. The other thing with this game is that you got to pick the right friends to do well in this game. You're not going to win if you pick bad friends. So tell us more about the social issues that you're trying to address with the game.
Yeah, so for so many students, they've actually maybe never consciously had to make a friend. They've
Mm-hmm.
grown up in the same community, they've gone to the same school all of their 12 years, and so they've just always had the same friend group. But if you go away to college, you are now like sort of dropped down with thousands of new people, and they're not all the same, and they have different backgrounds and different interests, and some friends may be really excellent assets to help you stay motivated to achieve your academic goals. But then there are some friends
Mm-hmm.
who may be there for a totally different reason and sidetrack you
Mm-hmm.
away from your academic goals. And so the game teaches players about the different relationship upkeep that some friends have, and what are the friends' superpowers. And the challenge for a player is to have to balance this out. Like, can I really have a friend who is going to who costs me money every week to maintain their friendship? And whenever I'm playing with a group of students, they're like, I don't have to buy my friends. I'm like, no, that's not what this is about. These are the kinds of friends who are always going out. And if you're hanging with them, you're going to have money to be able to go to the movies, to go for coffee, to go for pizza. And before you know it, that's a pretty spendy friend to have in your social circle. Can you manage that? Is the superpower that that friend
Mm-hmm.
offers such that it balances out that cost?
Mm-hmm.
And it's up to you to figure that out. And the greatest thing about gameplay is you can play again and again and try different strategies and test out a different group of friends in your social network and see what are the consequences of those choices. And I think that's really one of the superpower benefits of play is it's a chance to practice and play, lose and learn to ultimately win and succeed.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think that sometimes kids don't realize, like, in addition to friends who spend your money, there are friends who spend your time and your emotional energy. And trying, if you have a friend that is like very needy, has a lot of problems, is always wanting you to pay attention to their problems, could care less about your problems. That's like something that people can get sucked into. And I think a game like this can help them see that.
Yeah, within the board game, we call those the stressful friends.
Mm-hmm.
And that stress has a cost at the end of the game. It comes off your total score. And so you have to determine how many stressful friends can you actually have in your social circle. And whenever I play again with like high school students, there's like, I don't get this thing, a stress friend. I'm like, oh, do you not have any friends in your world that kind of cause you some stress? And then ultimately they'll go, oh, yes, now I get it. And if they still have that blank look, they're like, maybe I'm that person.
Oh, no.
Maybe I'm the stressful friend.
Well, the problem with the stressful friends is they usually never have the insight that they are the stressful friends. So if your game can get them to do that, then I will buy it for literally every child in America, because getting people to realize like, hey, maybe I shouldn't do that. That's a hard thing.
Yeah.
So, oh my goodness. So let me just take a look here. So your game, so they introduce the students to all these concepts, and then how do you think that they should play the game before college? Like, what would you recommend that families do just to get their students as prepared for college as they can be?
Yeah, so we've really designed the game and a companion curriculum. And so with teachers and educators, that is an actual curriculum. But for families, I mean, really, it's our social media platforms where we're always posting tips and ideas and questions that connect game concepts to conversations you would have with your students and with your kids. And so that might be around time management and balance. It may be around, here at the end of the semester, there was a number of posts that we put out there around wellness and well-being, particularly in that stressful finals period of time. So how are you taking care of yourself? And as parents, how can you, and guardians and family members, how can you check in on your first year college student to see how they're doing? I think as students are preparing for this transition, it's making them simply aware that a transition is about to happen and that they're not going to have it all dialed in, and normalizing that. Like literally just saying, it's okay if you're still figuring things out, to recognize that challenging situations and getting through them is how we grow as humans. It's how we learn as people. And so if everything is always kittens and rainbows, like you're not learning anything. And so this normalizing that having to go through hard stuff is what makes us better people.
Yeah.
It's what makes us better citizens and better workers and better employees and just more empathetic humans.
Friends, this concludes part 1 of a 2-part interview Lisa did with Dr. Tricia Siefert. We hope you join us on Thursday for the final part. All right, friends, on Thursday's episode, you're going to hear another question from a listener. Hillary's up this time, and I'll probably play one other question. We've got a nice little bunch of questions in the kitty. I know the episodes have been running a little long lately, and the problem is when they're really long is people get behind and then they never catch up. So I'll see whether we're going to run 2 questions or 1 question next week. Definitely Hillary's up. And of course, I'll have another entry from the Chronicle. Of course, you'll have the final part of Lisa's interview that you just heard, part 1 of part 2 with Dr. Tricia Siefert. And I might start this college spotlight on U Chicago. I just have to see. So, friends, remember, it's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's what you do when you get there and what you do when you get out of there. That is what will determine your career success. And I'm a little stoked right now because thank you gifts that I ordered literally arrived yesterday. I just opened them up today and I saw that quote right on top of it and it made me smile. See you on Thursday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us. You will get every single episode as soon as they are released. If you want to support our podcast, you can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can say positive things about YCBK on social media. And you help us stay commercial free and pay our staff by donating at yourcollegeboundkid.com and clicking the donate button. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. If you have a question or suggestion, just go to speakpipe.com/YCBK and hit the orange button and speak, and we will do our best to get your question or your comment in your own voice on an upcoming episode. I'm the producer of the podcast, and I live in Metro Atlanta. We have a fantastic team that has over 200 years of admission and counseling experience. Shout out to our co-hosts, Susan Tree in Pennsylvania, Lisa Ruff in North Carolina, 2 admission officers from Colorado, Hillary Dickman from Colorado College, Kate Strickland from CU Boulder, Vince Garcia in California, Julia Esquivel in Massachusetts, Linda Depker in Missouri, Andy Strickler, the Chief Enrollment Officer at Connecticut College, Heath Einstein, the Chief Enrollment Officer at TCU in Fort Worth, Carter DeLauro, a co-director of college counseling in New York, and Christina Lopez, the former Dean of Admission at Barnard College, and our international college specialist, Kevin Newton from Dallas, Texas. Our stupendous sound engineer who makes everything happen is Nemanja Matvic from Serbia. Our reliable webmaster is John Rooney. Website updates are done by Joy Stucker. Image editing by Vlad Honchar. And what would we do without our volunteers? Guy Pillsbury, Sony Patel, and Andy Bernstein are all helping us with podcast marketing. Carolyn Wood, Mark Doniger, and Carrie Roberts book interviews with thought leaders. Amanda Dugan, Colleen Sinoki, Nicole Resch, Trevor Smith, Ryan Stepler, and Lynn Labash send thank yous to interviewees. If you want a coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you want to reach someone else on our team, all of our bios with contact info can be found at yourcollegeboundkid.com under the About YCBK tab. If you want to get our free monthly newsletter, YCBK Plus, it's also under the About YCBK tab. If you want to see our recommended books and websites, they are on our website under the Resources tab. While you're on our website, check out our hundreds of interviews in their entirety. Check out our college spotlights and our upcoming events and receptions. And you can now do searches for past content by using our new Explore and Topics tabs. We really encourage you to explore our past content. We have close to 1,000 hours. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting with you every single Monday and every single Thursday.